Hello, my name is Jamie Maldonado. I'm a photographer based in East Texas, and I'm going to show you how I edit my images of negatives shot with a macro lens on a backlit surface, a light table in this case, shot from a copy stand. I have the introduction to this method of basically scanning negatives on my blog at jamiemphoto.com. That's JAMIEM photo.com, and there's a link attached to this for that, and I'm going to try to skip to the point here. Anyway, this is what I started with. This is a picture of a negative with a I'll try to use my mouse as a cursor here. My negative with the masked area here in reverse, and you'll notice, it's truly a picture of a negative, which means Photoshop is difficult to work with. So what you could do if you shot this straight from the negatives into Photoshop instead of going through RAW or something, or you could just open this directly from RAW, or maybe if you're really amazing and you know exactly how everything should work in negative, which I unfortunately don't, you could just go to Photoshop and push Command-I to invert the colors and everything would be hunky-dory. I don't work that way, unfortunately, so what I do is I reverse the curve. And I made an action for this because it's right here, and it does it in one click, and you see it on the preview what it'll look like. But what I like to do is basically a method that involves very painfully moving this curve around until it doesn't behave well, and I'm going to use the action. But you see what you do, and you'll see what it does with the action. Anyway, what I like to do first, just because it kind of saves a big reveal, and maybe it helps me feel better about this, but this method doesn't necessarily render perfectly straight photos, so there's a little bit of cropping, and of course there's this area here that's just not an image area when you shoot square, so I straighten it a little bit and crop, and I feel like this just gives me the best chance of seeing making a good first impression, and it's not really that much work anyway. So I crop it, and this looks like pretty much a nice negative and how it should be. And I go to my little shortcut I've created, and you see that the curve literally just reversed. And you see it's not quite black, and so I might have underexposed this slightly. You'll see I shot this at 1/13 of a second right here. And this reads 0 because the method I shoot involves a lens on an adapter and stuff, but the time is important, and the lens was actually set to something like f9, I guess, or f8.5 if you really want to say it properly. It is an old Hasselblad lens, which is a beautiful lens, and the same lens that shot this photo. Anyway, you see one of my issues, which might be film curl, it might be something else, and that it has a slighter corner here than over here, but we won't go into that right now, but I will show you a couple ways I fixed that. So I have my curve reversed, and it works much the same way. You can move the midpoint out and use this. This is now your dark point, and what I do when I underexpose is I'll move this in. It's kind of proper film editing here, or photo editing I should say, and you don't necessarily have to get this perfect in Photoshop, but in RAW I mean, but I like to kind of get it somewhere where it's kind of nice to work with, and your highlights are now your blacks, and your whites are now your blacks. Yeah, your white is your black, your highlights are your shadows, and your blacks are your whites, and your shadows are your highlights. It's really confusing until you do it a few times, but you'll get used to it quickly. Clarity works the same way. I usually don't do much there. Don't have any need for this because it's in black and white. However, and you'll see this is not the best example of this technique's quality, because I kind of didn't get my focus perfect because it was at f2.8 and my eyes are not that great. But I'm holding down Alt Option here. I'm on a Mac, and you'll see there's a pretty decent amount of grain, and it barely takes any sharpening at all to give you good grain. And you can zoom in a little bit and see that the grain is decent. Like I said, it's not my perfect example of this, but it gets you close. And you'll see real grain here, and this is probably about a 12 to 16 megapixel image. I shot it with a Nikon D600, and here's some mess, which I won't actually fix here. You can fix it in here, and I try to fix some of the worst with this little spot removal tool. But this is all stuff I can remove with dust and scratches in Photoshop, which I may or may not get to in this little thing. But if you look right here, you'll notice along the rebate border of this, you'll see a little chromatic aberration. I don't know if you can see it in the video, but it's a yellow fringing. You can make it black and white to get rid of that, or you could get rid of it in Photoshop. There are lens corrections, and then there's lens corrections in Lightroom. What I like to do, this is a new thing, it's really nice to do, is to just click remove chromatic aberration, and it does the trick usually. So I like it. It kind of clarifies the photo a little bit, makes it look a little nicer, and this feels pretty good. I don't have much need, and vignetting is also reversed, and sometimes I'll do that. And I'll show you one trick I use to darken the rebate and the bright corners in here, which is to use this graduated filter. And I use these Visco cam shortcuts, which I like a lot. So dodging shadows now means you're burning highlights, I guess. So it becomes very confusing, but you get used to it quickly. So I just do a little graduated thing to burn down the corners a little bit. It's not very necessary on this one, but you see that, and this is pretty good. And sometimes I'll curve a face or sharpen it or something if it needs it. I'll do little I'm umming a lot. I would fill speech, but I'm doing little adjustments like I normally do on eyes. And this is going into 7 minutes, but this isn't necessarily a speed technique, and I'm hoping that this is educational for all who do it, and I'm trying not to waste any time doing anything. So you notice I'm going against all common sense here and going darker to get brighter and stuff. So this just I'm adding sharpness because I can, and maybe some purist would call me on that, saying that I shouldn't do that, but I am, and I sharpen at multiple levels, and I could do all the sharpening in Photoshop, but I'm not ridging it up. I'm keeping it very normal, small, minor, and I don't see the little ridges and the things that people would try to say that, oh, you're degrading the image. I'm doing a very minor amount, the minimum to create grain in the photo essentially, and I leave the rest from the final print when you're making the print, because you should sharpen to your print size. So it's just the slightest hint of the actual grain, and this is pretty much ready to go into Photoshop. And I've got this set up on a little portion on my screen for video partially, so I can have some off-screen area, and also so I can just save on video size. So I pushed Command E to edit this in Photoshop, and in just a moment it's doing video, so it's probably considerably slower, but we'll hop over to Photoshop and see if we can wait for this. And really, a lot of times this could be considered the point where you'd finish and do your normal workflow, and everything is wonderful. There are a couple options here when you get into Photoshop though, and wait for it, and it's running video, like I said, and it takes a minute. So here we are, and I have just messed up my option here. Here we go. So it came in crop, and I'm not going to mess with that. So normally I would hit the F key to get some space around it, but that's messing with the video, and I want you to be able to see this stuff. So we have this, and I'm going to make a copy for editing, which I won't do on video because that'd be painfully boring. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to paths. Actually, I'm going to get rid of that because this step will get rid of that. I'm going to go to channels, and if you turn these off, you'll notice these channels look pretty different, and this is one option you can do to get different results from this. and I heard for some reason the green channel is very good for this, and I've had some success with that. So this particular shoot, I've been doing it because I wanted kind of a white, bright feel behind her. I wanted to have kind of a wintry feel, even though obviously maybe she's not wearing winter clothes. It's still got kind of that barren, cooler feeling to it. So let's go ahead and get rid of these channels and convert it now to grayscale. And we can also reconvert that to RGB because I found that stuff just doesn't behave like it should in grayscale online. And maybe there's a secret to that, but I don't know it. Anyway, so now we have this, and it sort of undid a lot of what we did in RAW, but a lot of the point of doing the raw workflow is that you just want a starting point. You want kind of a flat image, not necessarily your finished image as far as white points and black points go. So that's, like I said, another possibility, but the workflow is the same if you don't do this part, because you don't have to worry about getting rid of your fringing because you did that in RAW. And I might add right now that everything I've done in RAW can be done in Camera Raw, so you don't necessarily have to have Lightroom to do that. So I'm going to, like I said, copy my background for retouching at a later point, start a curve, and do my normal workflow. And you'll find what works and what doesn't just by whatever your normal process is. But I do like to find my white and black points. And sometimes, if it just doesn't get along with me, I'll do a selection and just do the rebate, make it black, and then work the rest separately. But I'm not going to do that in the video because that's a whole other ballgame. But now that I've got it to this point, this is a normal photo, except for it happens to be shot with a film camera. And if you ask me, and especially since this photo was shot at 2.8 and I have bad eyes and I'm not great at manually focusing, that you can see the amount of clarity and everything else you get from a different format, like a larger image format than your average APS-C or full frame 35mm camera. So hopefully this helped explain the Photoshop portion and the raw portion of editing images that you shot in negative with the method that involves a light table and a macro lens. And just for the record, my version of that includes a copy stand, a 4x5 miniature 4x5 light table that's originally made for viewing slides, I might add, and a mask I've cut out, my Nikon D600 camera, which is 24 megapixels. It's very nice for this, especially with 35mm and 4x5, I might add, and a copy stand to keep consistent height and straight, and keep your camera straight so you don't have weird distortion issues with getting your camera wrong. But it can be reproduced with a C-stand, a tripod, or probably something else I'm not thinking of. Anyway, hopefully this is another thing that gets you started, another basic step for editing these photos, and hopefully it combines your ability to shoot film with the ease and capability of raw processing in Photoshop. And it's a nice way to update something really beautiful from the analog world. And so it's digital and analog working together in beautiful unison. If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. It's info at jamiemphoto.com. That's JAMIEM photo.com. And you can ask me on the comments. I'll probably be able to read it at my website, by email, Facebook, Twitter, Flickr, 500 pixels, whatever works. Thank you for watching this, and I hope I've helped you out.